Excellent. All right, well, welcome everyone. The time is 4 o'clock. We'll call this meeting to order. Madam Host, can we do a roll call?
Chair Step,
Here.
Member Ben Willis. Here. Member O'Krepke.
Here.
Let the order reflect that all subcommittee members are present.
Wonderful. All right, we'll move on to the second item on our agenda, our public comment on non-agenda matters. I'm looking at our public right now to see if anyone wishes to speak. Janice, do you have a statement for us today?
And say something about the general plan being changed. And there's been a lot of things that have been altering in the landscape, both in the city and in the county. And I was surprised that it was done by the city of Santa Rosa when I showed up at the city council meeting, I think it was last time, for the general plan amendment that had to do with the Greenway.
Right. All right.
Comment.
Thank you for that. And seeing no other public comments, we will move on to item 3, our approval of minutes. Were there any edits or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, we will approve the minutes as submitted. And move on to item 4.1, our third quarter general fund review and year-end projections. CFO Alders, the floor is yours.
Is that the right one, Rick?
No, we did that one at the last meeting.
Am I looking at the outdated? I'm looking at agenda for today, but maybe it's the scripted agenda. Are we moving on to the, is that item no longer current and we are moving on to the formation of the Budget Deficit Advisory Committee?
There you go.
Okay, I do have that original item listed, but it's probably an outdated. It was vestigial. All right, so our real item 4.1 is the formation of the Budget Deficit Advisory Committee.
Right. So. So at the last time we met, we had a lot of discussion about the concept of a working group, a committee that would work on our balancing our budget and those items. So from that, I developed a very short presentation that sort of summarizes where we are. I think this is the what we could hope to get out of the group, the things we would look at and move forward with that. So next slide, please. So I thought it was important to have some sort of a mission that we'd be working with, and this sort of encapsulates it. That we would work collaboratively and transparently and objectively to correct the city's general fund structural deficit and create long-term fiscal sustainability. And it follows through with the goals that we have, but also the elements that we've been trying to put into our budget process as we move along anyway. So that's what this group will be working to do. Next slide. So this is a working group, and the structure for it, it is created by the city manager. And the size of the group will be at the city manager discretion. I wouldn't imagine it would be more than 10, just to have a workable group. We want to have fair representation from labor, the community, and finance and other exec staff. But we need to keep it a productive working group. So having a smaller rather than larger is generally better for that. We would do an application process for the people that would want to be on the group. This is similar to what we do for any of our committees with the public, but also internally. you know, when we had the city manager fellow program, that was an application process. So there's precedent in there. We can figure out how to do that, but that will allow the city manager to have some context when selecting the members of the group. Next slide, please. So, you know, we're basically looking at expenditure analysis and revenue analysis. I mean, those are the things that are gonna deal with our deficit. From the expenditure side, this is all stuff you are very well aware of that we typically do now. You know, we're looking at labor costs, pension, services and supplies costs. You know, we would want to look deeply into our FTE growth and changes in the individual general fund departments, their share of the general fund, and programs that have been added and changed as part of our overall analysis of where we're moving forward from an expenditure basis. And then on a revenue basis, you know, we could look at the trends that we have in our existing revenues, and that's something that we would look at just as we would with expenditures. But we would also want to have discussions about, you know, the types of revenues that we may need to move forward with, or different options that we would have there. Obviously, the biggest one, and you know, it's just the biggest source of general fund revenue is sales tax. The elephant in the room is that we do have a 0.5-cent general sales tax that does expire in 2031. So how that factors into our current situation plus our future situation. There is always the possibility to increase that tax, although we are up against our cap, so there's certain hurdles that we would have to go through with this. Other taxes and fees, you know, we still have an archaic UUT ordinance. There are some cities that are looking at different ways to apply UUT to, say, streaming services. These are all things that I think we could take a look at. We've heard of different fee-for-service ideas that have come up in our discussions with labor groups and that. So I think having a forum where we could kick around those ideas, see how they fit in with our our ability to even make those changes is one, but then how they would fit into our forecast and actually address our problem. For example, if it's gonna take a lot of money and a lot of effort to go down a path of a fee or a tax that generates very little revenue, is that the best thing we should do now? So part of that would go into it. So, and that's part of the timing and other factors that go, are we looking at 2026 or 2028? You know, how does that fit in with our forecast and what we could try to do? So potential recommendations that could come out of the group, there could be more than these, but these are just thoughts out of my head of what we could see, or look at efficiencies within the departments or organizations, whether it be through changes in the org structure, doing reorganizations, or just find different programs or processes that we currently do that we could do better and cheaper. We would look at the way that we make budget reductions, and try to be as equitable as possible and have recommendations on how we could do that. Again, mention process improvements and then recommendations on how we would engage with stakeholders, with the way that we are addressing our budget situation. I think it's important for what to come out of this group and or would think that it would be. I don't want to speak for the city manager, but that's part of that transparency, right? How do we engage with the community and labor groups and just staff in general of we have this problem, here's how we are trying to fix the problem, to have that sort of open book nature to this, I think would be positive for whatever changes that we needed to make, especially if it's around the line of revenue changes. I think what we learned from Measure EE and FF is that the community wants to understand that the city is doing everything it can to get within budget. And if revenue is needed on top of that, it's making sure that we could clearly state that, hey, look, here's everything that we're doing. And I think we've done that so far in our meetings and at council. That's the end of it. Very short. I think that sums up where we were trying to go in the last meeting. I hope that sort of solidifies things. I think from a time frame of this started, we're probably looking after we pass the budget. And so probably first part of July would be when we would, and, you know, again, the city manager is going to direct this. But I would guess that July is when we would want to get started. I know she's anxious to go sooner rather than later. So with that, if you have any questions or comments, I'm happy to try to answer those or note the comments.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, looking at my colleagues.
Sure.
Ms. Penellis, please.
So I was looking back at the, I think this is a great idea that I have no qualms about that. But I'm just wondering, looking back at the mission, to work collaboratively, transparently, objectively, on the structural deficit itself, and create a long-term plan for sustainability. So what are we looking for from the community members? What kind of feedback are we looking for specifically? And I ask that because I mentioned this yesterday. I went to talk to the chamber yesterday, and I just mentioned that we were all working on this, trying to encourage them to come to the meeting today. So, and they were very interested, just as a group. But I really couldn't give them any specifics as far as what kind of feedback we would like to get from them and how that would be implemented, if it would be implemented. The city has created many community groups over the years. I remember the annexation one. I actually sat on that one along with Chris Rogers. Chris Rogers wasn't on the council yet. And I remember that committee turning into more, promoting annexation, that kind of thing. And it was a Brown Act committee, by the way, just to say. So I'm just wondering what you envision this, you and the city manager, and I know you can't speak for her, but what you're envisioning, what kind of feedback they would be giving to you, how you would take that feedback and implement it into your long-term planning, so that whoever ends up serving on it, whether, it be these folks, the labor groups and community members, staff members, of course, who know what's going on, on the front lines, if you will, how that information will be utilized, I guess, is what my real question is.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I do understand how, especially for the community to come in and I think the way I would look at it is that what I would hope is that we could provide a better understanding of actually exactly what services we provide, how the budget works for those community members there. And that is something that I think that part of education goes a long way. I think we also need to know from the community, you know, what their priorities are, what, you know, basically what those interests are coming back. And then we're trying to find a middle ground. So if, you know, I think that's where you're, what I would hope to get out of it is ultimately for and the labor groups as well, is to have an understanding of how, you know, the context behind the forecast that we put up, the context behind the deficit, and how we are going to solve that problem. And then even more deeply educational if we can. It's a working group, so that's something that we can get granular with. But then to also find out how that intersects with what the community is looking for and what other interest groups are there. Now, there's no guarantee that somebody's going to come in from any interest group or community and that they're going to have an idea that's going to solve the problem. But if you have little bits from them, from labor group, from staff, you can kind of germinate a recommendation that may move forward and move forward that we could implement. If at the very least, we walk away with it that maybe we continue on the same path, but you have all of those groups understand more clearly why we're going down the path that we're going.
Okay.
So it kind of works both ways that way.
Okay. And just a couple other things. So do you envision this just for like next year's budget? You know, how long the longevity of this committee, and is it going to be ad hoc? I know we talked a little bit about this last time, or is it going to be a long-term committee? I mean, not that people can leave whenever they want to. I get that. They're volunteers, but just, you know, what are you all thinking? And is it going to be Brown Act? Is it?
It's not, it's a city manager directed group.
Okay.
So she's creating the group. So it's an internal one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So not an ad hoc, not a
It's just
Brown
her.
Act. It is a group that she's creating. I don't see this being a very long, I would think a year
Okay.
within that time frame. Hopefully our path is solid within a year.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
to be, we don't have a lot of years to think about ways to get there. So it's, we would want to work quickly and hopefully wrap things up in a you know, year and a half type of time frame. But I don't know that right now we haven't discussed specifics to the length of time of that group.
Okay.
That would just be my guess off the top of the head.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Krupke, anything from your end?
I mean, I do have a couple questions, but since this is a city manager's working group, I assume she would have most of the answers.
Probably, but you could try.
I mean, my questions are mostly on things like what the application process is going to look like. You know, you talked a little bit about the timeline. You know, what her preferred makeup would be. I mean, it's Yeah, I mean, it's probably things that you can't really answer.
Yeah,
So this is more of an
those would
FYI
be
than a-
difficult.
yeah.
for me to answer.
So, yeah, we can just move on then.
Let me try a few. And to your point, the city manager will, she's gonna have to think this all through. But from a more general city staff perspective, or just city generally, including city council, a few points that I'd like to just keep top of mind are that while on the committee, we absolutely want every voice. We want labor, we want public safety, we want city staff, we want the community. We want a broad spectrum of voices. At the end of the day, the issues that we're talking about, and this links very closely to our next item, we're talking about potential large-scale cuts to the city budget, in particular public safety. That's what's on the table here. That directly impacts the community. And then we're potentially talking about revenue generating measures, as you mentioned, whether it's a sales tax, a parcel tax, some other kind of revenue generation, which again falls in the lap of the community. So internally, and I'm sure we'll be talking to the city manager about this on our own. Having that community voice front and center, I think, is really important. We don't want this to become an echo chamber where we've got groups that are directly connected to the city operations being the primary voices at the table, even though they need to be there, they need to be important, because it's all the groups, all the residents who aren't at the table normally that this is going to land on. And so I want to underline that point. And then I mentioned other tax options. Obviously, in the Press Democrat article, in conversations here and in other cities, the idea of a sales tax has been kicked around. And so my question is, to some extent, are we really focused on a sales tax particularly, or is that shorthand for all kinds of, other kinds of taxes, like, for example, a parcel tax? The reason I ask is that in the socialization that's been done already with the community, there's been pushback, as there always is, to say, well, sales taxes are regressive. Are there other, we're not opposed to revenue necessarily, but are there other ways to get there? To what extent are we looking at different kinds of tax options?
So I think all tax options are on the table.
Okay,
I mentioned sales tax prominently because that is our largest source.
yeah,
And we do have one measure that is going to expire.
yeah,
And, that would represent about a $25 million hole in our general fund should that expire. So, at the very least, that should move forward. Now, whether that's increased or we, whatever we're going to do with revenue, if we augment the existing measure queue with other types of revenue measures, that should be on the table. I think, like I've mentioned before, you can't do it all with revenue, can't do it all with expenditures. We have to, or reductions. We have to find that balance between the two. We're going through, making the cuts that we're making this year is extremely challenging, as you all know, and you've heard. And the understanding that regardless of the revenue measures that we could use going forward, we are certain to have to come back and make even more expenditure reductions. So at this point, what we're looking at is what are the types of measures that would have the most impact on our budget, but also understanding the impact to the community. Looking at what expenditure reductions that we make, but also allow us to function as an organization providing service to the community. It's a very delicate balance that we need to draw, and that's what I think this group and then our discussions here and at the council will also go as we go through this. This is, again, multi-stages through just the budget process. This is just informing that process, this group, but also allowing the group to understand more of what we're going through in that context.
I completely agree. And I'm glad that you highlighted the timing of this as well. Because when you think about it, we're already going into the discussion of next year's budget, thanks to your team. And that's gonna, by the time we hit the end of this year, that's gonna be in full swing with presentations to council, with difficult discussions as we look ahead. The community is gonna have to be brought into that. And then with respect to any revenue generating measures, we need to, that again, in the next 6 months, we're gonna have to have a clearer path. And you, as a final point from my side, you mentioned the experience we had with EE and FF and the really positive impact that community feedback had, even in terms of how we ended up structuring that tax measure on the business community. I guess my hope is that we have something similar with this committee again, or that Marquisha has a similar experience with this committee, that there's a lot of feedback that comes in and helps us structure things in a way that that the community finds easier to absorb than if we didn't have the committee. So thank you for putting together this sketch. And that's all the questions from me. Anything else from either of you?
Do you want to do comments now, or do you want to do comments after public comment?
Why don't we do public comment first? Janice, any thoughts on this?
I don't know if I'm off the scale or what, but the EFID has come up quite a bit recently, and there's a lot of things that the public doesn't understand about it, and a lot of things I don't understand about it, even though I was very present with the county and when they were developing it and talking about it. We talked about it at the last meeting a little bit. But I'd like to see some sort of picture about the EFID, because I'm hearing about the event center that is wanted to be built, which would be a huge and that's a new thing compared to what we were talking about last time, which would be a huge fund, expense. So I'd like to see something about the EFID and it doesn't have to be specific, except of what's sort of on the table about it, and something that would, people could get a grasp of what it's about, because it's big, and know more about it. And in the paper I had read, I graduated from Slater a million years ago, and there was something in the paper about making Slater into a senior center. And actually, I thought that was an excellent idea. I'd love to have a pool there. The Finley Center was made for the seniors, and they quickly took it over after about 3 years, and the kids would come. And then the seniors had limited time to do 45 minutes of lap time. And it's just a big disappointment in all ways. And I used to run 2 miles in the pool up until, I don't know, 4 years ago or something like that. And, it just seems like it's not really senior oriented like it was supposed to be. And
Janice, just to be clear, the public comment here is on the committee that's going to advise the city manager with respect to the budget. Is your item tying back to that?
Well, this is related to the budget, and it's something to bring up for city council, something to bring up for finance, about possibly having a senior center at this side of town, which is Rincon Valley and that area, because they took it away from Bennett Valley and then Finley Point, or Finley Center. And I'm just saying that the seniors are really aggregated in my area, which is District 3. So I see that as being tied into the budget, and also because there's so many older people. And I'd like to see things that are more specific about what you're talking about, because a lot of people don't think abstractly. They just go, what's going on? and it's hard for people to wrap their mind around things. So anyway, I'm just throwing that out there because I thought that sounded like a good idea, and maybe it would be an answer to a prayer. I don't know. So
Thank you for that, Janice. And seeing no other members of the public here, we'll bring it back to council for final comments. Anything from either of my colleagues?
Did you want to?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. I think just for me, I have questions, obviously. So I'd like to see either an update or in the near future, maybe if it's July, great. Even if it's August, that'll do, from the city manager about this process. I don't know we need to report out about who the members are, or, but at least get an update about some of the things that were discussed, like the application process and timeline and those matters. So I'd like to see her do that. I'd also like, whenever that application process opens, to have that shared out to, if not council, then everybody else to, if not just council, then everybody else, so that, you know, we can spread it far and wide and get a wide swath of individuals to apply. That's all I got.
Thank you for that, Caroline.
I would just add that, I think, besides all the stakeholders that should be included, and I heard what, Councilmember O'Cree is saying, we want to make sure it is diverse, I guess, for lack of a better word. But what you were speaking about, Mayor, about the community being so key, community members to me are really key, because their perspective, you know, as people who live here, is going to be different than the stakeholders who may not necessarily live here, but have memberships and people that they are representing. Because, you know, my concern right now is what I'm seeing is an economic downturn, and I'm hearing that even from different groups. For example, the hotel tax, they're telling me that's not going very well, which is something I heard yesterday. So, you know, just things of that nature. And I don't know where we're going to be in 6 months. And that could color a lot of the thinking right now, even though we're trying to plan for the long term and looking at sustainability down the line, a year from now, 2 years from now, and beyond, because perhaps things are not going very well right now. And that also applies to any revenue that we're thinking about, particularly any kind of sales tax, because I'm not hearing good things about that either. And I know if we were to embark on something like that, I want to assume that we would really vet that and do polling and make sure that it's worth our while. But I also agree with Chair and Mayor that we really need to explore other types of revenue that might go over a little bit better with folks who are afraid to spend their money right now. So.
Thank you. And those two comments sum it up for me. Thanks for pushing this forward. We all know how important it is. Yeah, we look forward to talking about it more in the future. And with that, we'll turn to item 4.2, our revenue item, which is closely related. Alan, back to you.
Back to me. Yes, so this is just a brief update on, and it ties in with where we're going. We're typically, when we start looking at the potential for revenue measures, we will hire somebody to help us with that, not only with the strategy around a measure, language, outreach, all that type of stuff, but also a polling group as well. This is just an update to the committee. We didn't meet last time, so we weren't able to do that then. We have opened up, and I believe it closed yesterday, a formal RFP process to find a revenue consultant along that. This is somebody to have on board with us when the council decides to move forward with a particular measure. It would allow us to do some polling prior to that, to help inform the council of however we're going to move forward. Should there be challenges, whether it be legislatively relative to our sales tax cap, or looking at other types of UUT options or anything like that, we would be able to draw on the experience of the revenue consultant to help us with this. So the next step in the process will be to review the RFPs, to ultimately select a firm, and then to go to council and approve the contract. And we will need to appropriate funds for that contract. This is a non-budgeted item, but I think a worthy item. Of course, should the council not decide to go that route, that's fine as well. But this is just starts our due diligence process going with that. So that's all. The purpose of that was that I wanted to make sure that you understood where we were going, that we were headed in that path. It's just a preliminary.
Thank you for that. Bringing it back to my colleagues. Jeff, go for it.
So I guess I'm a little confused. So the application process for this, or the opening for this, was 5/1 to yesterday,
It closed yesterday.
and it opened 5/1.
Not sure when exactly it opened.
Okay, it opened 5/1.
Okay.
And so I guess for me, one of my concerns is that the communication around this has not been ideal and optimal so far.
Okay.
We did have a meeting on April 22nd. It was open 5/1. There's an article in the newspaper.
Yeah.
Before this item came before us. So I guess for me, my largest question is going forward, to use the mayor's term, how are we going to socialize this? What is the plan for socializing this throughout the community and to get feedback outside of just polling and messaging?
Yes, I don't think I'm following the question. I apologize.
So outside of polling and messaging,
Right.
how are we going to interact with the community as a greater whole to discuss this item, to discuss this concept, should council want to go forward with it?
To discuss the concept of hiring a revenue consultant.
To discuss the concept of a sales tax?
How would we normally do that? I mean, we would follow along the lines of, I guess. I'm not fully. I guess I'm not following your line of question. And again, I apologize for
Going
that.
back to the previous item, the mayor, the chair, Mark, whatever.
Whoever you want.
Laid out a couple of, he asked, is it just sales tax or sales tax kind of a catch-all for all revenue
Right.
options, right?
Yeah.
So outside of just the working group, right, because the working group is budget, as you pointed out, that is
Yeah.
not only revenue, that's also expenditures.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So as we use this consultant for messaging and as we use it for polling, outside of that, right, how are we going to interact with the general public, the business community, stakeholders,
Right.
those types of individuals?
So whichever type of revenue that we choose to go for, and it may not be sales tax.
Right.
We would go through the same type of educational process, I would imagine, that we did through EE and FF, through that process. I think it would be good to have when we went through EE and FF, what made that very successful was having somebody like a Scott Alonso here that was able to have the contacts to set up meetings with various individuals. He's not with us anymore. He's up in Sacramento. But it's that type of help that I'm seeing that we would be able to provide the education that goes along with this. So what we did in those meetings were discuss the budget situation that we're going through and what the need for that revenue was. We would go through that same process, I would imagine, unless the council or the committee has other ideas of what we would do. We could do town halls. We could do any number of things in order to help communicate this, as long as we're not advocating and we're only educating. there is a line that we have to draw where the city has to step back. But we can provide education and understanding of why we're moving down a particular path. And that's what we've done before. And I would imagine we would go along that route. The revenue consultant that would come in is as I would envision it, would provide us with a suite of options that we have from a revenue standpoint. And, you know, it could be sales tax, but it could be any other type of tax or fee items that could help with that problem. So that's what we would be drawing on them. The educational materials are more once you've landed on a measure that the council wants to move forward with. And now we're developing stuff specifically for that. So that's on multiple phases. It could go over a multiple period of time.
Chair, if I could, the concept of having a consultant on right now helps the city manager and the CFO be nimble as we start looking at different options, right? We're concluding the budget. We're setting things up for further discussion going into 26, 27. In doing that, we understand that there's likely to be more serious discussions around what the various revenue needs are for this community and whether that will help offset further cuts. So having the consultant on board will provide the city manager with the opportunity to be more responsive over the course of the next quarter as we get into those discussions in more detail. There will definitely be dialogue with council members to try to identify where we should be looking from the standpoint of potential revenue options. And this consultant will allow the city manager to provide a level of response. They'll also give us information in advance that can help advise the council, this isn't the right time to go after this, or this isn't the right time to go after that. It's a professional consultant to assist in the development of that strategy, but it also provides us with the tool should the council decide to pull the trigger.
Thank you for that. And Jeff, anything else? Oh,
If I can
yeah.
just add one more thing, just on the timing of this. So to along what Jason was talking about, going out for an RFP for that consultant wasn't for any one specific type of sales tax or type of revenue measure, be it sales tax or anything. The idea is to get somebody on hand to help move forward with this. So
With what?
with any type of revenue measure that we could possibly go with. So I feel like you're kind of pushing me in a hole that this is solely for sales tax.
No, what I'm trying to get at is
I need somebody on hand to help me help the city manager decide to go with if we're going forward with anything or not.
and that's the crux of my question.
And
Is it solely this consultant and people in this room that are talking to the city manager? Or is there a portion of that where what is it, 7 of us in this room could say, a sales tax sounds great, a parcel tax sounds great, all this is great, let's move forward. And then the second it's daylighted, we just get bombarded, as we did in a Press Democrat article recently, with this is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So my question is, how are we using this consultant, and how is this consultant going to get outside information aside from just, hey, do you want to take a poll? Because 90% of those people are just going to hang up. That's what I'm trying to get at.
right. So again, just on the timing of it, our RFP process takes a long time. So I started this. So I started the RFP process and didn't even, it honestly did not think that this is going to be that big of an issue. It's not, it hasn't been in the past. Now I understand the Press Democrat article, of course, you know, was what it was. again, to Jason's point, I think that needs to be probably part of the questioning of the firms that go in there. That's the way that we can solve that problem right there, is to understand exactly how they think that we should be able to move forward with involving the community in any way that we go forward and getting their feedback on what type of a revenue measure would make more sense to the community and operationally for us.
And I don't think there was any intent to subvert the council's discussion about what actually needs to happen moving forward. I think it's purely having that professional on staff so that there's a way for us to respond to council requests and conversation. I've never seen a poll be developed outside of council approval process.
Right.
So all of those things, those communications and outreach will all be part of a plan that'll end up coming forward depending upon whatever revenue discussions council wants to have. So I understand the frustration with the timing on this. I do think, to Alan's point, this really is, we just need to have the professional on staff. So we know this conversation's coming. We want to be ready to be able to answer rather than have council say, we want to start to investigate this. And then 3 months later is when we actually have the consultant on board.
Right. I guess, so I'm not trying to say there's any subversion or anything like that. And the communication, we'll put that aside, right? Like that's mostly water under the bridge at this point. So what I'm trying to get at is there's a disconnect between, all right, we're getting for me at least, and I'm trying to understand, is that we're getting a consultant and this consultant will give us a recommendation of some sort, whether that's do nothing, whether that's go with parcel tax, whether that's recommend this to council, recommend that to council. So between those two is what I'm trying to figure out. And so far, the only answer is we'll talk about that with the consultant. So or we'll use that as a vetting point with the consultant. For me, that gives me pause because there's no preconceived what we're looking for in this. There's no, we would like a consultant do A, B, C, and D, whatever. Like, it's just, we're gonna hire a consultant and then we're gonna get an answer and that's what we're gonna recommend, is what it seems to me. And
Understood. And I don't believe that was the intent. I believe it's just simply to have the tool in the toolbox so that when the discussion happens, then they have the person that's qualified to do the work. I'm not sure that there's intent to present you with the work and then have you respond to it without prior discussion.
Thank you for that, Caroline.
I think I just want to piggyback on what Councilmember Okerke's saying. Because I will say, I don't know about you all, but myself as a council member got really slammed about that article, and it wasn't anybody's fault, and I'm not, and to the point where people were telling me we're going to make groups and we already pay 10%, we can't pay more, you know, I mean, people are upset. And so I think, what I'm concerned about is I think the council, and I kept saying, it hasn't come to the council, nothing's come to council. Don't worry, I don't know what's going to happen, you know. So I think what's important is that there's complete transparency for the council about and the community, because otherwise people jump to conclusions. They already see that we pay more in sales tax than anybody else in the county. So that's a big concern. And that's what I talked about, the economic downturn, whether some people feel it's happening and some feel it's getting better. I feel personally, just when I go shopping, it's not getting better. And so at the moment, people are feeling very squeezed. So, and I know we all do too, and the city does as well. So I just think it's really important that there's a lot of transparency going in with this. Because I think what you're asking here, it says, you're asking for committee approval to engage in the services of revenue and polling consultant to assist with future revenue ballot measure strategies. And I think it's important that we get that information, that we find out what other options there are. I just feel like as that process goes along, that we need to be informed as it's happening. I guess that's my concern, because I don't, not that I can answer folks' questions at this point, but I just want to be more informed before things get out into the community. I guess that's what looking for. And it's not, you know, I don't think anybody's done anything wrong. We have to look into this. We need to get this information. I just think it needs to be as open as possible.
Understood.
All right, I think I might be about to say the same thing in yet another way. So let me get on my soapbox for just a second. And just to be really clear about the process, and I'm fully on board with having a consultant. We need to have a consulting firm do this. We can't possibly do this on their own. At the end of the process, we're gonna have this consulting firm. At the end of the process, there's gonna be a deliverable where that consultant comes in and says, look, here are some potential options. These are the projected amounts of revenue that you could raise through these different channels. Here are some previous experiences that other cities have had, comparable cities across the state. I'm gonna guess there's some kind of polling data of we did, you know, group discussions of some kind or polls, and we see such and such level of support. All that's good. I think what Jeff, or what all three of us up here are saying is that based on the conversations that we've had on our own, and I myself have been out there for the second summer in a row now, basically doing sort of informal, what's the word? Campaigning? I don't know what it is. Sales tax ground preparation.
Surveying.
Surveying. Thank you, Janice.
Pulse taking.
Pulse taking. And as my colleagues have mentioned, it's rough out there right now.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I am most interested in seeing from that final deliverable about with this consultant is that those comparable cities are actually comparable. And we remember the deliverable last year from, and I always forget the name of our firm, LDP. Who does our sales tax collection?
Avenue.
Avenue. Who was the consultant we used for EE and FF?
Yeah, for business tax?
Yeah.
HDL.
HDL, sorry, I can't remember their name. Where the cities were not really comparable. The polling such as it was not conclusive or not particularly informative. And so what we ended up with was a recommendation that conceptually made sense. And indeed, a couple of cities have adopted it, but was dead on arrival here. We can't go down that avenue again, especially after our experience last summer, where we have even less margin here. And then in addition, we've got this very uncertain economic climate that is already impacting residents and businesses. So there's, to the extent that Californians are looking forward to paying yet more tax of one kind or another, there's even less margin for that right now. And so for us at council to make it, or in this body to make a decision about whether we move forward with anything, that community engagement process or that community feedback data, the comparable data, that's got to be rock solid. Otherwise, any potential revenue channel, I'm going to look at with suspicion, just based, I think we all will, just based on the conversations that we're having. So with the RFP process right now, as you indicated, I think we should really focus on what their community engagement strategy is coming back, what their comps are, comp cities are going to be, et cetera, because I want to move forward with some kind of revenue generation strategy. But I want to know with reasonable certainty that there's a viable path. And if all we have is some projected numbers on what, say a utilities tax could or utilities fee could bring in, but no solid discussion about whether the community will absolutely absorb it, it's hard for me to want to pitch it. And ultimately, we're going to be on the front lines for pitching this. And so, as my colleagues just mentioned, I think we need to make that a really, a real area of focus. And then to your point, Alan, about how city staff can't get into campaigning, that's fully understood. There's that whole campaign process on the back end, but we can't even get into that, the whole community education campaign focus, until we know we've got a viable path. And again, based on the socialization or based on the discussions that I've been having, including with people that I would expect that understand the city, that I expect to ultimately be supportive, there is a lot of skepticism out there right now. So whatever we bring forward has to be locked up. Otherwise, I'm going to be a little hesitant about wanting to champion it, even though in my heart, because I know the numbers, I know we got to come up with something, as we've discussed publicly in the paper and on the dais. But we got to have all our I's dotted and T's crossed on this one. That's the message I guess I'm underlining. Sorry, I'll go for it.
I was just saying that's the message I'm writing down.
All right, well, any questions before we go to public comment? Janice, thoughts?
No, I think you said it all.
All right.
You did a good job.
All right, thank you, Janice. All right, bringing it back to our group for final comments. Do we have any other soapboxes we want to climb onto?
Yeah.
Oh, good, Jeff, go for it.
No, and I'm sure you can sense the frustration in my voice. And I'm not trying to, you know, batter the two of you at all. I just want to, as always, Mark is far more diplomatic and has a softer touch. But the thought is the same, we need to make sure our i's and t's are crossed. I will say that to dovetail off of his point of, we understand the difference between development and campaigning. There is a portion the city can do that is not campaigning, but is educational, right? We saw that with Measure H and Fire, where they could come in and say, from the people who were doing it, here's what Measure H would bring in, estimated. Here's what our costs are. Here's how that could be done. And as Chief Westrope did every single time, this is strictly informational. I'm not campaigning. And I think that we could have, and I think that probably we should have, some sort of bring the government to the people type scenario over the next year.
Absolutely.
Whether that be very, very narrow town halls, or educational, budget educational presentations where we're in each district, you know, certain team members we're not gonna get into potholes and parks and all that stuff other than like, hey, this could pay for those. But, you know, here's what the budget looks like. I think by that time, we get our final numbers end of July, is that correct?
From a
Roughly?
October.
October, actually.
All right, so Q1, I guess that would be Q2.
Yeah.
So at that point, we would be able to say like, hey, here's why we made all the cuts. Here's what we were expecting to happen. Here's what actually happened. At no point do I believe any of that is going to stray from what we're seeing now, right? I mean, there's been turn back before, there's been things that happened before, but I don't think now is the time, right? Where we can literally say, we thought we were going to have to offset our budget with X amount from reserves because we were going to get X. Here is that X in big, bold, red numbers, right? And I think that educational process would be very useful. You know, we talk about bringing government to the people. There's people that live a mile away from City Hall, but they might as well live 100 miles away because they don't feel comfortable coming onto a government campus. They don't feel comfortable coming to City Hall because they don't know what to do. They're not as brave as Janice that, you know. So, but if we go into the different areas of the community and say, here's what, you know, I think this is.
I would absolutely love to talk to anybody, anywhere, anytime about the stuff that we're dealing with. I have no issues with that. In fact,
Great.
I absolutely look forward to doing that.
Great. I think that would be very, very useful. Yeah, that's kind of where I stand. You know, we do need to be careful of what we do going forward. Not only just sacrificing that, but also we have a lot of irons in the fire that we need to make sure that we're doing everything properly and we don't want one to affect another, right? And then also, yeah, I think maybe since you're acting until tomorrow, maybe that's something that you and the city manager can work on as a schedule to go into various parts of the community, if it's each district or what have you, to try to have a budget presentation. Because to the mayor's point earlier, this is not always a widely attended subcommittee. And I think as you, outside of employees and labor groups and department heads, whenever you guys do a presentation, there's not a lot of public interaction because it's a very nuanced discussion for most people, right? So I think if we can get out there and bring it to the people and have real, you know, this is what it means. You know, I know we had, you know, to communicate, we had a lot in the press about what's happening this year. We need to talk about next year.
Yep.
So I'm glad you're so eager to do that. I hope your team would be eager to do that as well, because I think it's direly needed. Sorry, that's my soapbox.
That's a good soapbox. Caroline, what do you got?
Not much left on my soapbox, except to say that I agree. I think getting out and doing educational meetings within the districts, I think is a great idea. I think maybe you're right, this discussion is more nuanced, but people do understand budgets. Many do live on their own budgets. So I think it can be, not to talk down to anybody, but it can be simplified to this is where we're at, that kind of thing, and people will understand that. And I think the more that we involve the public in that process, I think the better. So, yeah.
All right, let me try to end on an optimistic soapbox. I think that we have to explore this, and I think we've got a good chance of making it happen. There's a lot of good news coming out of the city right now. I think we've got a good case to make next year. I, for one, am ready to be out there making the case. I do think our margin for error on this is almost zip right now. And everything depends on having our PR, our PR strategy and our educational campaign locked in over the next, 6 months, 12 months at the most. And so I guess that's why you hear the unanimity from this group, because again, we're getting the feedback and we know we're gonna be on the front lines of this. Like, let's get our ducks in a row and make it happen, because it should be a great story for the city. And I think the community will come on board, but we can't send this one out half baked. We gotta be locked in. Otherwise, we're in for a really rough next 12 to 18 months. But I'm preaching to the choir. You guys are on the front lines too. So I'll leave it there. Anything else before we go on to
Could
our,
I make one comment? Related to this, please?
Janice, let's do it.
Okay, this is the thing. I'm public, even though I ran for city council at the same time Caroline did. And what I want to say is that the idea of engagement is a great idea, but the city has made it very complicated. And I'm a really assertive person and I'm persevering. I've had a really hard time finding out about the meetings because they'll put the date up here, the time down here. Sometimes they forget the time. I've talked to engineering about this. I've spoken with the city clerk about this. And there's a professional way to do this, and it should be uniform throughout the city so that the date, time, place is at the top of whatever you do. And the other thing is in the paper, the pixelation of the text has gotten so it's dot. And you can't read it. I get a magnifying glass and I try to tell people, well, here it is. And they look and they're like that. It's just not acceptable because you don't know where the meeting is. It's way down the middle of the text and it's difficult. And it's difficult for me. And like I say, I know how to do this. So I'm just saying, you want to engage the public, be transparent, be out there and have uniformity as far as how you explain it and where it's going to be, what time, etc.
Thank you for that, Janice. All right, moving on to item 5, future agenda items.
Do we need more?
Anything? Do we need?
Do we add more to the plate?
Maybe besides the budget and revenue measures, does somebody want to throw something out there? Looking at my colleagues, I'm assuming it's a no from our side. Anything from your side? Alan, Jason? Scott?
Our next regular meeting is
July 10th.
July 10th. My suggestion would be that we skip that one.
Okay,
Let us regroup from the budget adoption.
okay.
And that'll put us into, let us have something more robust August.
That works for me. Any objections?
No, that sounds good.
Let's skip to July. And just to show that I read Shelley's emails closely, I did notice that I think it's October, November, we have 2 meeting dates that are scheduled like 2 weeks apart.
Yeah.
Are we gonna, I was wondering if we needed to adjust that, just reduce it down to 1 at some
Yeah,
point there.
the October one at the end of the month, that is, that's our year end update. And so that one can be pretty full with a year end budget update.
Okay.
So usually we'll try to make the November one something completely different than that.
Okay.
So we'll.
We still want to go both?
Or we could cancel the November one. Although then you get into December and then that makes it difficult. And then, so I hear what you're saying. Let's play that one by ear and maybe make a decision on it in October.
I defer to the group. I noticed we have a December 11th scheduled as well. I defer to your department as far as what's needed in order to present the information to us. If the meetings are important, let's do them. If, again, you don't need extra meetings to prepare for. So if you want to consolidate those October through December dates in some way or move them around, I think we're open to that.
Okay, so maybe this is something we could talk about a little bit
Sure.
more in August,
Perfect.
as we, talk with my team and the city manager and kind of plan out what to bring to you all. And yes, I do not want to have more meetings than we need to. But we also have a lot that's on our plate and a lot to discuss with you. And so we'll figure out how to time that out.
These are the most important discussions we're having. So whenever we need to meet, let's meet, but if we can be efficient, let's do that too.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Thank you. The meeting's adjourned.